I've got to tell you this story. The story is going to take weird ups and downs. So I'm just kind of prepping you and our listeners for that. When I was little, we met this wonderful woman who was a notable figure in my growing up. It's a very complex situation, and there are complex emotions that come with it. There was still good that she gave me. I don't know why, but I was feeling particularly compelled to write to her. Just some energy that was pulling me to want to reach out to her.
How many years has it been?
28 years later. When we talk about resolutions and New Year's and things like that, I wonder how many people are in similar places where they feel pulled to something and then are stuck because they don't know why.
Why does it matter why? Do you need the explanation for being pulled to do such a beautiful, generous act? Look at the outcome that occurred. If I'm going to err, I will err on love, on extending grace and seeing the humanity. It's all good, only good.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter why.
Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
Okay, Dr. Ignacio, I've got to tell you this story. I want to kick it off. So forgive me for just like jumping in there, but okay. So the story is going to take kind of like weird ups and downs. So I'm just kind of prepping you and our listeners for that.
I'm ready.
When I was little, my family, my mom in particular, was friends with this woman that she met at the bowling alley that was near our house. Okay. My mom was a cocktail waitress there at night. And we met this wonderful woman who was just vibrant and lovely. And she was a tremendous vocalist. She could sing and she was wonderful. And she was a part of our life. We would go to her house and she would come to our house, she and her husband. And she was a notable figure in my growing up and my siblings as well, particularly my sister and my brother that's closest to me in age. Anyway, fast forward until I was a teenager, and she and her husband were in a fight, an altercation, and shockingly, she killed him. And this was incredibly difficult. She did, yes. And it was very difficult for us to wrap our head around the fact that this was incongruent with how we knew her and her personality. And it still is something that to this day, we struggle with making peace over. And I was a teenager at the time. So fast forward decades, and she's still somebody I think about pretty regularly. My sister and I talk about her. My mom and I talk about her. And we talk about what happened, but we also talk about the memories that we had with her and the joy that she brought into her life. And we recognize that it's a very complex situation, and there are complex emotions that come with it, where we both recognize just how shocking and how, heinous this act was, but also just this person who was so positively instrumental in our lives and gave us such gifts and joys. And like I said, she was a big singer, and she was always encouraging me to sing, and she was always encouraging our family to sing, and just a light in our life. Okay. So I was able to actually find online her information to be able to send her a letter. She's still in prison. So I was able to get her information to send her a letter in prison. And I decided I was going to do it. I decided I was going to write to her.
She's still in prison. How many years has it been?
So 94, 95. So 27, 28 years. What is it? 2023. It's like I said, I keep forgetting it's 2023. Yeah. So 28 years later. Yes.
And what's her prison term? Do you mind my asking?
I believe it's life. I know that she was up for parole a couple of years ago and then was denied. And then I think recently was also up for parole again and was waiting the status of that as well. I don't know why, but I was feeling particularly compelled to write to her. There was something in me, and there was just some force, some energy that was pulling me to want to reach out to her. And what's interesting about that is I would draft a letter and it sat in my inbox, right? Because I was typing it, I wasn't writing it, but I drafted it and then it sat there, and then I would always kind of come back to it, but not fully complete it. And yet it was always there, right? There was always some piece of it like lingering, like, no, this is something you feel you want to do. So I did.
Can I ask you, in the letter, and by all means, you can say no, or we can delete if you change your mind. Not only did you feel compelled to write a letter, what were you compelled to write? Did you have questions, or did you have admonishments, or did you have, what were you compelled to write?
For this initial letter, because I did believe that there would be further communication, this initial letter was a reintroduction of myself, and also acknowledgement that for whatever happened between her and her husband, and that obviously awful tragedy, that there was still good that she gave me, right? And that there was still things that occurred in my life because of her that I was grateful for. And I wanted her to have that knowledge. Not only did I want her to have that knowledge, I wanted to put that out there for myself. Okay. So I will say it was much an opportunity to share that with her, as it was an opportunity for me to be able to put that out there myself. So the letter kind of went, along the lines of like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but this is who I am. And, this is what you gave me when I was younger. And I think about you often. And let me tell you who I am now. And I got to talk about, my career, and I got to talk about my relationship, and I got to talk about my family. And I also got to talk about the podcast, which, I'm so incredibly proud of. And then I just kind of ended like, should you want to respond? There's a couple blank pieces of paper in here and a self-addressed stamped envelope, because I didn't know what kind of resources were available should she want to send a letter back to me. And I included a picture of myself. And that was the letter. There really weren't any questions other than, do you remember me? It was a little more of, like I said, a reintroduction, and just an acknowledgement of gratitude for the things that I did get from her, and that my family did get, and the memories that we have of her in a good way. So I sent the letter, and I told my sister and my mom about it. And my sister was just a champion, as she always is, for me. And she was like, good for you. Great. And my mom similarly was supportive. And I checked the mailbox like every day to see if she, had written back. Again, I don't really know why, but I just was hoping that I would get a response. Well, here's the crazy thing. So I had the letter sent to my office address, and I kept checking the mailbox. Nothing came. And then the other day I went downstairs. The mailboxes are mounted on the wall, and above it is the bin for the outgoing mail. As I went to check our mailbox, something caught my eye. It was like a blue piece of paper, and it had the word Zachary on it. And I thought, there are not many Zacharys in the world. And every time I see the letter Z, it kind of catches my eye. So like, yeah. I was like, oh, that's interesting that there's another person in the building whose name is Zachary. And as I looked closer, it was a Post-it that was on a piece of mail, and it said, return to sender, no Zachary here. And I was just like, oh, that's kind of odd. And then I look and I see it's my envelope. Well,
the one that you wrote, the self-addressed stamped envelope.
I had inadvertently put the wrong office number on the letter. And had I not gone down to the mail area on this particular day, the mail person would have collected the outgoing mail, and I would have never known that, she had responded and sent it. Like, it would have been lost because it would have been returned to her. That part of me that was like, I am feeling pulled to do this. Like there's something that is drawing me to this, was reinforced because that day I was like, I'm just going to check one more time, like maybe somehow, and there it was just waiting for me. So if she had responded, and that alone, I was like flushed with this kind of weird, complex set of emotions of joy, and then sadness and grief, and somewhat anger that this act like took this person out of my life. And so all these different things. And she wrote a beautiful letter, and pieces like she remembered me, and she threw some very nice compliments my way about being proud to know that I was still performing and singing, and that she could tell that I had some talent back when I was little, and that she's excited that it's still going. And she also mentioned the podcast in her own way. I want to read that part of it because I think it's pretty spectacular.
Oh my God, I'm gonna cry.
She said, "It is a joy to know you stayed true to yourself because you were always enough, just as you were and are now." Then she goes on to talk a little bit about her situation, and she's mentioning a little bit of the health problems that she's endured. And she said that she's, 69 years old, and this woman this is her life, right? This has been, what did we say, 28 years. There was an ask to continue the communication if I was open to that. I've really sat with this response because I keep struggling with, like, I don't know why. I don't know why I felt so compelled to write to her. And I don't know why I felt so excited at the possibility that she was going to write back. And, and as I'm even talking about this out loud, I recognize that I was having this kind of conversation with my sister and my mom, and particularly my sister. I just said, I just feel like I want to write to her. And my sister too was like, I want to write to her too, and so she shares in that. Yeah, I kick off this episode with this story because, we talk about resolutions and New Year's and things like that. And I wonder how many people are in similar places where they feel drawn or pulled to something and then are stuck or handcuffed or handicapped because they don't know why. And do you understand what I mean by that? And I bring it up.
I do. And all I can say is, why do you need to know? Why do you need to know why? If that is what you were pulled or called to do, does the explanation help you? Does it in your knowing why, does that benefit you any more than what is already clearly a blessing? I don't mean to be, in no way am I being dismissive. I'm actually, it's more, I hope I say it in terms of it being liberating.
Yeah. In
that rather than being stuck in the weeds as to like, why did it happen? And can you explain it? And that's, for example, that's the faith versus science kind of thing. Do you need the explanation for being pulled to do such a beautiful, generous act? And do you need an explanation as to why you felt that pull, why you felt that inkling?
Elizabeth, first of all, let me just say this outright. I don't feel it was dismissive at all, and I didn't take it that way. I actually appreciate the directness of the way that you put it, because it's so simple and it's so clear. And you're right. You're absolutely right. So I don't feel dismissed at all. In fact, in many ways, sometimes I appreciate that kind of honest, clear truth, because that honest, clear truth has actually hindered me from really acknowledging what you said, the blessing that this is. I'm so stuck in why did I do this? And now when I tell people, I have to explain why, or I have to reason why. So if they say, well, why do you need to do it? Like I felt that there was some kind of need to have some kind of explanation rather than just living in the place of recognizing what a blessing this was or what a moment this was. So I don't feel dismissed at all. In fact, I feel very seen.
We did a previous episode about do you believe and miracles, and this kind of harkens back to it in terms. And I'm the first to admit that I'm placing my own projection and my own value system on this situation that just occurred, which is for me. It isn't for some reason, or I wonder why. For me, it's just a matter of fact, like, oh, it was a miracle. It was a blessing. It was divine intervention. It was serendipity. God called you, serendipity, source, force, universe called you, and you showed up. And it happened in such a way that to me, it really is so clear that it was just, miraculous divine intervention, because you were somehow, some way, i.e., hello, God, force, source, universe, you were pulled, you were compelled to want to write a letter. You were then pulled and compelled to actually write a letter and then actually mail it. You were pulled and compelled to check that mailbox one more time at an off time that you normally don't check. And you were somehow, some way pulled or compelled to look up and see that blue Post-it note and see your name. There was just so many things that happened, quote, serendipitously, when actually, in my eyes, it wasn't serendipitous at all. It was actually very, very divinely planned. Now, having said that, I'm the first to admit that I am, like I said, placing my own faith-based value on your situation. But I'll also just say objectively, even without any faith, for those who don't practice any sort of kind of faith-based practice or exercise, still, was it not a beautiful situation, a beautiful multiple collection of beautiful moments that occurred that can, from this moment, continue to grow? So why does it matter? The why? Why were you pulled? Why did you feel that way? What was it that you were looking for? You just did it, and you acted on whatever and why ever you felt compelled to do so, and look at the beauty of it. I will say this might not be the why, but I'll tell you what has come of your story for me. I mean, you were telling the story and I not only had goosebumps, but I had tears in my eyes and my leg was like literally shaking because it was just so stirring. And I can't help but throughout this whole, your whole recounting of this story, think how, there's this saying, right? Hate the sin, love the sinner. And I just couldn't help but think throughout your telling the story of how we all make mistakes. And I mean, yes, to take another life is egregious. So I'm not dismissing that. I just know that I sensed in you part of the struggle was, how can this person whom you loved and had such capacity for kindness and love and grace also commit this act? And for me, actually, it was just exemplary of how we all are human and we all make mistakes, and how, given certain circumstances and situations, and unless we are wearing the shoes of that person, who knows how or why that person acted and reacted the way that they did, and who's to say how I might behave in that exact same situation. So very easy for me to say and to judge, but we're not here to say and to judge. We're here to live our life and learn throughout our journey and come from a place of love as opposed to come from a place of judgment. When we say that we're all multifaceted in a good way, we also, as part of our multifaceted diamondness, there are some things that we have done, mistakes that have occurred that don't define us. We have to reconcile with it, and we have to, in some way, pay repercussions for it. So it's not to dismiss it, but our mistakes, our failures, our acts that we regret aren't necessarily the whole of us. I, when I was a resident, an intern, actually, so I was a general surgery intern, because in orthopedic residency, you have to do 1 year of general surgery first before you do the 4 years of orthopedic surgery. And I was in Washington, D.C., and one of our trauma rotations was at DC General, and that is the inner city, high security hospital. So the top floor, and forgive me if I talked about this on a previous episode, but the top floor is where the inmates were, and especially the high security inmates, if you know what I mean. And so literally to get to that, I think it was the third floor, you went in a private, separate elevator. And you rode up to the elevator and you get to this long, kind of scary corridor hallway, actually, that then leads to an iron gate, if you will. I'm not being dramatic. This is really what it was. And that iron gate had this like trap door open for the guard inside to look at you first, and see that, you are a physician, and let you into the anteroom. Then that guard knocks on a second iron door, or clangs on a second iron door, and the security guard from that room looks out through their peephole to us in the anteroom to say, yes, we can now go in. So that's where we then get into the main room. And the main room is where a number of, high security inmates are staying. And so you can imagine what they were there for, and when I say inner city, I literally mean, like, if we had a gunshot victim that was in the ER, we had to have police officers in the hallway outside the ER because other gang members would be there to want to finish it off. Like, this is the type of hospital I'm talking about at DC General. But anyway, I have to tell you that in that main room where all of the high security inmates were, I dare say that some of the most grateful and respectful patients I have ever had the privilege of taking care of were those inmates. And I know the stories of regret that they had and the lessons that they learned. And I'm not going to glorify it either. I also, encountered some, hard-hearted criminals that have no regrets. And who am I to judge? I'm not there to judge. I'm there as their physician to help take care of them. But I just recognize in that experience of that month rotation of DC General that a mistake, an event, a sin, even doesn't define the whole. And I certainly myself would not want to be judged by my mistakes and by my regretful acts and by my sins. I'd like to think that there are other things of myself that I do and try to do to redeem me of that. And I just hope and think that from your story of reaching out to this woman, and this woman lovingly, and I'm sure gratefully reaching out to you, that has as much of a lasting impact than her life sentence of the crime that she committed.
No, you're absolutely right. And you're hitting on so many things. First of all, I thank you for sharing what you shared, because it helped me put answers to, or not answers, that's the wrong way to say it. I'm sorry. To put some resolutions to some of the things that I've been feeling. I struggle with our tendency as a culture to distill something down to a black and white issue, and felt the need, or I felt compelled to have some answer to somebody who could come back and be like, why would you write to her? She did this heinous thing. So therefore, like, she is undeserving of a letter, or she's undeserving of, so why would you do that? And that kind of ambiguous voice, I don't know who that person is necessarily that would say that, but I felt the need to have that answer ready, which is why I think I felt I need that answer to why. Right. And then as you're sharing that beautiful story of that tremendous work that you did at DC General, it is such a complex it's such a complex situation. It's such a complex issue. And yes, ultimately, who are we to judge? And you also reminded me that when I was a member of the Notre Dame Folk Choir, every year we would go to the local prison and we would sing for the prisoners there. And there were there were inmates who were part of the maximum security that could not come out. They were unable to come out and to listen to us sing. So we would go outside on the other side of the fence, and we would sing in the hopes that our music would carry to the very small windows that were all the way at the top of their cells, so that music might be able to reach them somehow. And it's not as easy as just saying yes or no, this or that, do this. It really is quite complex. And I want to thank you, because not only did you not dismiss me, I didn't feel that way at all. You actually saw me, and you also saw the situation for the complexity that it is, but also the beauty that it is. And in sharing what you shared, helped that little part of me, that little voice in me that was like, you don't need an answer. It was just what you felt you needed to do. Not only for her, maybe, but clearly by her letter, but also for yourself. And that's really all that matters. And then also there are humans, there are people, there are real souls in the middle of all of this. So I know I'm getting a little like emotional and a little woo-woo. So
This
forgive
is
me
an
for all of
emotional
that.
talk. No, it's
It
an
is, but
emotional
I just,
story.
you hit it right on. You really did. And thank you. Truly, truly thank you.
I just try to come from a place of, who am I to judge? And when I say that, so I am the first, with this Me Too movement and everything, I'm the first to come to believe the victim and, be angry at the perpetrator. And that is just my natural visceral reaction. And so I am not one to I'm not at a place yet where I can say, oh, I embrace and love all people who have committed a crime. Not at all. I have my own human natural reactions. But I also try to remind myself and come to a place of, well, who am I to judge? I'm not the judge, and I wasn't there. And I say this because my brother is a criminal defense attorney. And for the longest time, I'm about to be 52. For the longest time, I just really could not understand how he could be so passionate and committed to his chosen vocation, or that he followed his vocation, his calling. Because I'm like, that guy clearly did it, or, that woman, confessed. And so she did it, and there's no denial and all this kind of stuff. And he came and comes from a place of, it's not always about proving that the crime didn't occur. It's not always about proving that somebody's not guilty. If they were guilty of that crime, they're guilty of that crime. But my role is to be sure that they, as humans, get a fair trial. And that was an aha moment for me. And then just in looking and reflecting on my own life and the mistakes that I've made and regretful acts and, people that I've hurt either by omission or commission, how I wouldn't want to be judged and I wouldn't want to be defined purely and solely by that. And so therefore, in wanting and hoping for that grace bestowed upon me, then my role as a human on this earth is to, if I'm going to err, I will err on that side. I will err on extending grace and seeing the humanity, and err on love as opposed to judgment. And then if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But again, I'm not the ultimate judge, right? I mean, right. And again, based on my own faith, I believe God is the judge. And so my role here, as to serve him, is to be a messenger, an example, an invitation to love and to grace and to healing, not for condemnation and judgment. And like I said, and if I'm wrong and that person is evil, okay, well, then I'm wrong. But I erred on the side of love and grace and humanity.
Yeah. And I will say that I certainly try to live by that as well. No saint here by any means. And there are sometimes those issues are things that I do respond very judgmentally towards. And that's okay too, I think. And I acknowledge that those do exist in my efforts to try to be like, to separate whatever the actual issue is from the human, which is what your brother does, right? Which is like, no, this is a human still at the center of all of this, that does deserve some rights, even in light of whatever crime may have been committed and whatnot. I just know that there are some topics that I just respond to very quickly, and I know that that's the case. And I know you always say this, you're like, and that's okay. And that's okay. And in the same way that I also acknowledge that it would be okay for people listening right now that would say, well, I don't understand why you would write to her. And I accept that. I think because I knew that could exist, I was so intent on trying to find some kind of explanation for it when no explanation was actually needed.
No explanation is needed for them or even for you. Yeah. You don't need to know why you felt compelled. Look at the outcome that occurred. All good, only good. So why does it matter why?
Yeah. Yeah.
God bless you, and God bless I don't know if she has access to listening, but certainly just her alluding to this episode in the letter brought me to tears. So, God bless her. God bless, the victim's family, who are entitled to feel however they feel. I have no idea. And I don't even know why I need to even justify that. Who am I to say that? Everybody's entitled to feel how they feel. It's their feelings. It's their reality. It's their experience. But thank you for sharing your experience. What a beautiful, moving, multifaceted story.
Really? I mean, it is, right? I mean, when you think about it, and I was nervous. I mean, she, at the end, it invited me to speak to her on the phone, and that kind of raised all kinds of new feelings and complex feelings and responses and whatnot. But I don't think I, until now, and per our episode last week, took a breath and acknowledged the true blessing here, right? The true good that came out of all of this. And also, I hadn't honestly thought about bringing this up on the podcast. I really thought that this would be something I would just keep to myself, but I'm so glad that I did, because of all that it's unpacked and all of the little thought nuggets that you've packed into our craniums. But also just for selfishly, and I don't mean that in a negative way, for the opportunity to just look at this situation for the beauty that it is. I hadn't done that yet. And so I just want to thank you for that gift. And I want to thank our listeners for allowing me to go through that kind of in somewhat of a organic way. I mean, this is a little bit of a different style for our episodes. And thank you for going on this journey with me, regardless of whatever your thoughts are about the actual situation. Just thank you for letting me do that today in the episode.
We benefited from your story. We benefited from connecting with you. We benefited from what your story might make us think about ourselves. So again, it's all good, only good.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter why.
Well, thank you, everybody. And as always, remember that you are simply enough.
Just as you are. Period.
Mm.
Mwah.